started? Thank you. Good morning. My name is Michael Raber, and I'm going to walk you through the timeline of starting my startup all the way through exiting and selling it to a company in Philadelphia. And the first thing I want to start with is I'm assuming there's some folks in the audience that are like me, right? Either you know somebody or you're actually like this, where you just have tons of ideas, right? I mean, I can remember back to being a little kid and just coming up with ideas on how to do this or do that. And, you know, so it's kind of been with me my whole life. In 2001, I went to my second startup, which was Traffic.com, and stayed there about 10 years. We were acquired by Navtech, and then we were acquired by Nokia, so I went from little small startup where you have the ability to innovate and do really cool things to big company where you know, you have to go through 6 levels of management before you can even, you know, get the opportunity to do something new. So I was really looking to get back to startup, and another piece of the puzzle was when I started at Traffic.com, I started my family. Now this was 10 years later. My daughter, I think, was about 9, and my son was a little bit older, and you know, it was time to think about what I was going to do next. So I went to a startup weekend in Philadelphia in January of 2011, and I got to tell you, that changed my life. I was in a room with people that shared the same type of drive that I did, right? Inventing something new. What can we do? How can we do it? Who can I work with? I specifically went to that startup weekend, not with my own idea, but with the idea of helping someone else. I actually wanted to kind of see that side of it. And that's what I did. And it's funny enough, it's almost 3 years to the day that I went to that startup weekend. So after the startup weekend, I go home and I sit down with my wife, and I had been working on a startup on the side in the automotive space. And I said to my wife, you know, I'm not going to quit my day job yet, but I really want to focus on trying to figure out how to you know, do the startup thing and how to move that forward. And she said, okay, go ahead. And so I spent the next 3 months, you know, February, March, and April, building my website, building my vision, building what was in my head. And got it all the way to the point where, you know, it was ready to be live on the website. I even paid for a terms of service and privacy agreement, you know, working with a lawyer. And I learned very quickly that I had missed something. I'd actually missed talking to people. I had new customers, right? I had a product, but I didn't have a business. And I missed a whole big step. You know, it felt great that I actually built something, but it was, you know, in the end, it was just something for me. I couldn't do much with it. At that time, I started to get more involved in the startup community in Philadelphia itself. And I met one of the partners at DreamIt Ventures, which is an accelerator program. And you know, I went to their website and I did some research, and I started to learn about what a startup accelerator was. And for me, you know, I had 20 years of experience building software, managing teams, you know, working at a startup. You know, I felt like, you know, the next step was to do my own thing, but I didn't know how to jump out by myself. And so I saw this as just a fantastic opportunity. Wouldn't it be awesome if, you know, I could be a part of, you know, the DreamIt Ventures and get a company in there. So what I did next was I went back to my pool of ideas. I felt like the auto product I had built was not right for the accelerator, and to be honest, I didn't have a lot of experience in that industry. So I go back and I start thinking, and I realized that, you know, I had this mobile device, this mobile phone, and when I actually use someone's app and I want to give them feedback, the only way to give someone feedback today is to actually go and leave either a positive or a negative review in the App Store, right? And the developer doesn't actually get the ability to access you. You know, it's just a piece of text that you put up there. And I realized that, well, what if I could merge something like Get Satisfaction, which was taking off at the time for the web, with mobile. And inside the app, the user could actually communicate with the developer directly. To me, again, big vision, right? I mean, you can take over the whole mobile industry, turn it upside down. So the next thing I did was I applied to DreamIt, okay? And you have to fill out the application, you have to create a video as to, you know, what your product is, what your vision is, your team, things of that nature. And we waited. I really felt like my life was on hold at that point, right? So, you know, if I could get into DreamIt, that could help me get to the next step of figuring out how to build a startup. And after about 5 weeks or so, we got a phone call, and we were accepted to come in, or we came in to do an interview. We came in, we did our interview. It couldn't have been a room that was much bigger than it was holding the, I don't know, 6 or 7 people, you know, all squished together, firing questions, and you know, I think we did a pretty good job. And you know, we got a thank you, and we'll be in touch in about a week. So getting back to the waiting stage, right? We got a call back the following Friday, and my wife and I had already made the decision. If we get into DreamIt, I'm going to quit my corporate job. We're going to bootstrap. You know, we have a mortgage. I have 2 kids. You know, we were going to jump in with both feet, and we were going to figure it out. That was our philosophy. You know, from our perspective, the worst thing that was going to happen is that the company would fail. We would learn a lot, and if I had to, then I'd go back and get another job somewhere. So, you know, we were willing to put, you know, part of our life on hold to follow this dream, and that's what we did. We got accepted, and I quit. I quit my corporate job, and a couple of weeks later, we started DreamIt, and you know, it was pretty interesting. I mean, it was definitely a change, but you know, it was something that we saw that was, you know, valuable, and you know, was going to move us forward. So we were one of the companies that came in with what's called a paper napkin idea, right? So I didn't actually have a product. All I had was a vision and an idea. And I had hired 2 contractors and my wife as well was going to help. So there were the 4 of us. I was the only developer on the team. I had a contractor helping on user experience and a contractor helping on the business side of things, and my wife was helping on the business side as well. And so what we did over the next 6 weeks was build a minimum viable product, right? By talking to customers. When you're in an accelerator program, it usually gives you the opportunity to connect with a lot of different people, not just the partners themselves and with the mentors in the program, but with other team members, as well as the local community. I can't tell you the number of doors that were opened up by me just saying, hey, I'm part of DreamIt Ventures, and you know, this is what I'm working on. It definitely opened up doors and conversations. So it took us about 6 weeks, and I think part of that was I was the only one building it. So I'm building it, I'm trying to run the startup, attend all the different types of events, and there were a lot of things going on at that time. It took 6 weeks to build it, and after we built it, you know, I felt very comfortable that I had built a minimum viable product that met the vision of what I was trying to do, but I had a challenge. And that challenge was that everybody loved the product, but nobody was willing to pay for it. I couldn't get anybody that was willing to even pay $10 a month for my service, right? They all saw it as, yeah, this is neat, but, you know, I'm really just trying to get people to know that my product exists, or my, you know, trying to get app downloads. People were definitely focused on different aspects of, you know, the mobile ecosystem. Maybe I was too early, maybe it just wasn't quite right, but it clearly was not a fit. And so I had another big life decision, right? There's 4 weeks left. The accelerator program is 12 weeks. At the end of the accelerator program is what they call demo days. So you get the ability to demo your product, what you've been working on for 12 weeks. And hopefully you've actually built a product, you're starting to acquire customers, you really want to have a story around what you've been doing. So when you're standing in front of a room of 250 investors, right, people are interested in what you're doing, and hopefully there are follow-on conversations for investment and those types of things. So I've got 3 or 4 weeks before demo day, and I realized that, I could demo what I have, but I'm really not going to move forward with it. So I had to make a decision, and I know most of you in this room have heard the term pivot. I don't know if it's quite a pivot if you pivot to something or move to something that's completely unrelated to what you're doing, but that's what we wound up doing. Is I kind of went back to my pool of ideas and started to think about what it was that was a real pain point in talking to other companies and developers, and even in building the SDK that I built to integrate into other people's apps. What were my challenges? And like the bell went off. I mean, it was like boom. That aha moment. I realized that it's really hard to build a native mobile app, right? And what's even harder is you build the app, you push it up to the App Store, let's say Apple in this case, Apple takes a week to go through the review process, and then it gets downloaded to people's devices, right? Now, if you want to make a change to that app, how do you do that, right? You have to go through that whole process again. Well, what I realized was, well, no, you don't. I figured out a way to get around that process for certain types of changes that would work within Apple's guidelines, Apple's rules. And I just had this huge aha moment. So I spent the next week or so proving out the technology. Okay? And what I did next was, I then, as part of the demo day, I demoed mostly the UXFlip concept that I had with a little bit of FeedbackTrail, kind of explaining, that we pivoted and things of that nature. But when I got to demo day, it was really tough, right? Because I'm demoing a vision, I'm not demoing a product. I really wound up starting over as part of DreamIt Ventures. It was the right decision to make, but it was a really hard one to make. When you're in an accelerator program, you definitely feel like you're in this protected bubble, per se. And when demo day was over and the accelerator ends, the bubble goes away, right? You're now completely on your own. And so I basically had to start dreaming over again. And that's exactly what we did. So I'm going to walk through a couple of lessons learned while I was in the accelerator program. The first one is, if I were to do it again, I absolutely would have had an MVP walking into an accelerator program. Okay? Probably for the biggest reason would be, in a program like that, what you're going to do is there's a lot of value that you can get out of the program. But depending upon where your business is within its life cycle, will depend upon the value you're going to get. So I spent a good 4 or 5 weeks building my product instead of showing my product and getting feedback from potential investors and things of that nature. If I had walked in with the FeedbackTrail MVP on day 1 or close to it, I might have realized earlier that it wasn't viable. So that's one of the things that I'd like to share. The second, let's get one. Sorry about that. The next thing is everything takes longer than you expect. Okay? And I know this is obvious, but when you're in an accelerator program, in 12 weeks you're trying to get 3 or 4 months of work done, or maybe 6 months of work done in a very short period of time. And I don't think it's just an accelerator program. I think it's just in startups in general. Everything takes longer than you expect. And what I've learned is just kind of go with the flow. And have more than one thing going on at once. If you're just waiting, I kind of had that funny slide earlier about waiting to find out about whether we got into DreamIt. Looking back, shouldn't have been waiting. Should have been building my product, right? Should have been building my MVP. So nothing's ever going to happen in the time frame that you expect. The team that you start with might not be the team that you end up with. It's not just for accelerators, but in specifically here to accelerators, I definitely saw this. I had 2 contractors. Midway through, one of the contractors was looking for founders equity. I didn't even have a product. I didn't even have founders equity really because I didn't even have a company. And people, and so I had to let that person go. When we pivoted, the other contractor just wasn't a good fit for what we were pivoting to. Those were hard decisions. Kind of the lessons I learned there. The lesson I learned there was you can't take for granted that people that are working with you or working for you, are always constantly sharing that same vision that you have, and you have to check on them. You have to, these people are working for you. It's your company. You need to make sure that that they're still engaged in helping your company be successful. Because if they're not, I can tell you, it definitely brings down motivation, not just in yourself, but anyone else that's working within your company. When you're working in a company with 100,000 people, one person who's not motivated is not great. But when you're down to 3 people and one person's not motivated, it's a big deal. So DreamIt ended. I'm starting over. I spent time for the next 3 months. My wife and I sat down. We're still bootstrapping. I'm not taking any salary from the money that I received from DreamIt. We're totally living on savings at this point. And we sat down and we put together a plan for 3 months. So I have January, February, March to actually, move the business forward. And to be honest, if we didn't move the business forward in some way, we were going to have to make a hard decision, which was, do we sell, right? And So what we did was, we worked on it. We filed a provisional patent on the idea that we had. And again, the idea was being able to change your native mobile app without having to go through the App Store process. And it was hard. It was exciting. I went to many events in Philadelphia. There's something called Cocoa Heads, which is iPhone and Mac users group, and I demoed my product there. I got feedback. Any place I could go to get feedback. I was trying to get as much feedback as early as I could this time around. We were fortunate enough to get into a conference in Philadelphia called Philly Forum, and we were one of the companies that demoed in the demo pit. I think there were like 12 or 15 companies, and this was at the very end of March, and we wound up winning Best of Show. We wound up winning the conference, and that was just a big boost and a big validation of what we were trying to do. There were executives from large organizations from the Philadelphia area coming through, and what was interesting was, everybody got it right away, and what we had a demo where you could come to our tool, our application, and it felt magical. You could actually go and on a website, which was our portal, you could go and make a change, and it would show up right on the device. So we could show instantaneously how you could make a spelling change, or do A/B testing, or in the future do something like personalization. We were able to show very quickly and succinctly what it is our product was and how we could fit into the potential long-term vision of what they were doing. And they got it, and it was great. So this was the end of March, is when this happened. So Bob Mall was my mentor during DreamIt, and he was there the day that I had the aha moment, and I'm drawing on the whiteboard, and he's going nuts, and he goes, "Michael, this is huge. This is going to be huge," right? But again, it was still just a vision at that point, right? It was just an idea. So he and I met briefly in January. He had left Boomi and Dell to go to appRenaissance, which is now Artisan Mobile, and he essentially said, "Hey, I'm interested to see what kind of progress you've made, but just to let you know, I'm going to start my own mobile company." So there actually wasn't a lot of sharing at that point. I hadn't filed my provisional patent yet, and so I didn't want to share too much of how I was doing things and what I was doing. So in March we met up again, and he was actually part of what was going on at the Forum conference. But we met earlier in March, and I showed him what I was working on. At that point, I was able to do that, and I think from the point of where he saw the vision of what it could be, and to what I actually brought it to in a very short period of time, it was very exciting. I think very exciting for both sides. And so, he's very interested in seeing how he could leverage or license the technology. And ultimately, it came down to, he kind of threw out there, "Hey, well, what about if we acquire your technology and you come work for Artisan for you?" And that's ultimately what it came down to. Was it seemed like a perfect fit in a lot of different ways. And so I wound up selling the intellectual property and all of that to Artisan Mobile, and I came on board. I'm currently the Director of Innovation for Artisan Mobile today. And so we'll walk through a couple more lessons learned here. So I never learned this until I did UXFlip and until I pivoted. And there were two crucial constraints that helped me innovate in what I was doing. Okay, the first was Apple won't let you make changes to your app without going through the approval process. Right? Huge constraint. Everybody's trying to work within the constraint. I tried to work around the constraint. Right? I came up with a way that would allow us to make changes without having to go through the approval process, and specifically changes that were valuable to business owners. Okay. The second constraint I had was, coming out of demo day, I had no offers I was looking for $350,000 in seed funding, and I had a lot of interest, but we were so early. Everybody, all the investors were like, once you have a product, once you have a VMP, minimal viable product, MVP, come and talk to us. And so I walked out of the program not having great leads for funding, and I chose to continue to bootstrap, to really focus on building that first version of the product. But what was interesting is at the time, I won't say they were competitors, but everyone that was building something that would translate into a native mobile app, they were using HTML5, and they were building WYSIWYG websites to kind of simulate what would be on the device. And there's still companies that do that today. Okay, I didn't have money or time to build a team or to work on that for what was kind of the norm at the time, right? So what I did was I came up with this. I mean, and it's funny because I've been building applications for 20 years, and I never had a reason to do this, right? But what I did was I used the app itself as the simulator. Okay, I came up with a technology that would allow the website and our back end to talk to your app that's running on your phone. So you could say, hey, I want to change that text, and then it changes the text on the phone. I didn't need a WYSIWYG website to do that, right? I leveraged the phone itself. And when I came up with the technology, it was clear to me based upon previous experiences that I could do that. But I probably never would have come up with that idea if I had had the funding. I probably would have followed at the time what everybody else was doing. And so, I believe constraints, even artificial ones, throw artificial constraints into the mix, right? If you're building, whatever you're building, look at what other people are doing and introduce an artificial constraint, something that's going to cause you or make you think differently. I absolutely think that's very important. Next one is full-time commitment. So, I started off with this service and website for the automotive industry, and it was really hard to do that while I had a day job. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to get into an accelerator program, but when I was committed full-time to what I was working on made a huge difference. I mean, it's, especially for me and my family, every month we're okay, well, are we on target? Are we meeting our goals? If not, then, maybe I need to start thinking about looking for a job or another way to pay for things. Being forced to actually find ways to make your business successful is very important. And then the seventh one, the last one I have is that, some people will tell you that it can't be done. There were many people that told me what I was doing with my UXFlip technology, that Apple would never let you do this. You can't do this, okay? There's now more than a dozen companies that are trying to do similar things to what Artisan Mobile is doing today, okay? And if I had listened to them, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you talking about what I'm talking about right now. So, just keep that in mind. You're always going to have people that are going to give you feedback. You have to filter that feedback. And maybe you can't do it, or maybe you shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It's kind of my philosophy. And that's it. I mean, that's kind of my story and some of the things that I've learned. So.
Awesome story. Thanks a lot for doing that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Who's got the first question?
You said that they bought your IP. When did you file your patent? Because you said you didn't file a patent, then you filed an original patent. Was it ever approved, or did you just assign it over to them?
Right, so I filed a provisional patent in February. Okay, so when they acquired all the intellectual property from UXFlip, they acquired that provisional patent. And then while I was at Artisan Mobile, we filed a full patent.
So it was never approved, but
It has not been approved yet, but it's in the process right now.
Mark, can you introduce yourself? Maybe we'll do that as a formal thing.
Mark Raber. I'm a part-timer here now, and I just joined last week. We're coming through the Wednesday night night owls times since I've been branded. Actually, I guess the whole connection is because I've been teaching myself how to write code for the last 6 months in Ruby on Rails, and I happened to stumble across one of Brandon's posts in one of the forums I was in, and I found out that he was from Westchester. I'm like, wow, this is right on in Kennedy. So, yeah, that's.
And you're running a company? Also.
Yes, I have an online video startup, and just redoing everything.
Henry, what are you? What's burning in your brain?
So I'm really pumped about becoming a better programmer and what this space provides me right now. For example, talking with Brandon, Mark, and Chris, who lines me up with projects that really, like when a fire is under your posterior, it really gets you motivated to learn something that you really want to learn. It takes it from something you might be devoting some hours in your afternoon or evening, and then all of a sudden it's smack dab right in the middle of your day. It's like, bam, I'm achieving my dream.
So you have a question for Michael?
Man, there's a lot of pressure with that question. I'll think about it.
Oh, let me ask one. How hairy did it get? Like when you left your job? How many years did you have at Nokia?
So actually, it worked out fairly well. I had been at Nokia for a little over 10 years, but the folks I had been working with, I had been working with throughout those 10 years. So I don't think it was a surprise when I gave my notice. So and everyone wished me well. And like I said, I don't think it was a surprise to most people.
Well, the other perspective, from you and your wife's perspective, to leave that cushy, not cushy, but
Cushy,
big
it was
company.
cushy. I mean, when you're at a big organization for 10 years, I mean, I'll be honest, your salary rises, right? So, yeah, it was a big deal to leave.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I was 8 years at Moody's, and it's funny. Local patch covered us or did a story on it, and his assumption, he's like, oh, everyone there is 20. I was like, actually not. It's mostly guys who have, and some women who have, mostly guys trying to get more women. You know anybody? Said you get experience from working in the field, and then you probably get frustrated that you can't solve problems as fast as you'd like to. And so I don't know if that rings true with you, but you just had it with corporate culture, and you jumped out to solve problems more rapidly.
Right. So one of the challenges for me at Nokia was I had moved up the chain, and I was doing more management of people than I was actually, actually working on solving the problems, if that makes sense. And there was a point in time where my manager said, to be blunt, if you want to continue to get raises, you got to become a manager. Kind of hit that cap of being an architect or a tech lead, that kind of stuff. And so that's what I did, and I don't regret becoming a manager, because if I hadn't become a manager, I wouldn't have learned how to work with people, right, rather than doing the work, which is there's a lot to learn there. I think I was a manager for like 5, 6, or 7 years, but I was really ready to get back to kind of diving into the nitty gritty, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't have to be the person who finishes all the code and makes it production ready, but I like to get in there and do the initial pass at how do we make it real.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't getting those opportunities.
It's kind of an oxymoron of corporate culture. You take people out of what they love and what they're great at, and you make them managers in 37 seconds. What's his name? This guy runs 37 seconds.
Jason Fried.
Jason Fried. He's really an advocate of not following that path, to keep people doing what you're good at. Kind of like a master carpenter. A master carpenter doesn't stop working and manage others, or maybe they do, but there's that concept of the master.
Yeah, so you gonna do it again?
Am I going to do it again?
Yeah.
Absolutely. 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 So the question is, will I do it again? Absolutely.
Sounds like you have something.
Oh wait, Brandon, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Brandon. I'm a software developer, and I guess I met Chris just through the community out here in Westchester and saw this place. It's a great place to get put together and do some events and learn from everyone. That was kind of my idea with the night owls, was to just get people in here talking about their projects and helping each other. And being one of the tech people, feel like I always need marketing help. There's plenty of marketing people, so I'm happy to give tech help where it makes sense. Hopefully, you guys are interested. If you haven't been to the night owl session on Wednesday night, it's a great opportunity. You just want to hang out and talk, or you want to learn the code, or you want to learn anything. There's probably someone here that knows something about something you want to learn. So come by. It's free, and there's beer, food.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
My name is Dave Mann, geek through and through, working at doing consulting now for myself, moving into product and startup space. I had a question, could you talk a little bit more about the patent process, because I'm about to head down that area of the area. I'm just curious what it's like.
Awful.
Great,
The question
great,
was,
okay, thank you.
what was the patent process like? You know, I only had like, what, 15 minutes. You know, I usually, my wife will say, I could have talked about this for like 3 or 4 hours, you know, nitty-gritty details of things that happened. Patent process was hard. You know, when the money we got from DreamIt, we fed completely into the company, so I never took a penny of that. And part of that was to pay for, you know, the original patent. But to even do that cheaply, you have to do a lot of it yourself. And so, you know, I had a...
Fine cheap.
I think I still spent $3 grand. You know, and it's around $2,500, $3 grand with the law firm I was using. But it was hard because, you know, it has to be in a particular format, and you have to describe things in a particular way. And so, you know, even though I spent close to like $2,000 or $2,500, it must have taken us 2 weeks to write it, and I must have rewritten the thing, I don't know, 8 or 10 times, and I was probably spending, I talk about things taking longer than you expect, I was probably spending 8 to 10 hours a day on it for those 2 weeks. I mean, and, you know, I could have paid somebody, like, you know, probably up to like $10,000, and they would have done it all for, you know, a lot more for me, but I just didn't have the money, you know, for, you know, having a quick start. So it's a lot of work. My suggestion is find a patent attorney through a reference. I think that's the best way, because you'll hear about someone else's experience with that particular attorney, and you know how they worked and how you can work with them and things like that. That's what I would do. I didn't actually do it all on my own, so I can't speak to that. The reason why I didn't do it all on my own, when people say you can, was I wanted to make sure that we were covered from an IP perspective. Right? I didn't want to leave a hole or an opportunity that I did it wrong, that somebody, you know, that I could have just had in the future. So I was, you know, even though it was like $2,500, that to me was an investment. You know. So I went to that.
Yes. Can I just ask for a little bit more detail on when you decided that you needed IP protection? Because a lot of us will build something. Is it patentable? How did you come to that decision?
So it's a good question. So, you know, how did I come to the decision of needing a patent? What I learned in the accelerator program through talking to investors and being prepped to talk to investors is that investors like a little insurance policy, right? So if you're thinking about taking on investment, you know, they want what's called an unfair advantage, right? And a patent is an unfair advantage, right? It means you can do something that other people can't. And so, you know, I had, you know, and we were going to take on funding, and so we thought that, you know, having a patent or provisional patent was an important part of the process.
Do you have any recommendations on things that aren't necessarily technology based? Like if you have maybe self-patentable or like a consumer app that just does something like aggregates information, or like if you're doing a Twitter app, you're using a Twitter API and you're displaying it differently, like
Where's the line?
yeah.
I can't answer that. You have to talk to a patent attorney. Mainly because, you know, my experience is they'll find a way to figure out how to make it patentable. You know, and that's where talking to the attorney comes into play. You got to tell them what your idea is, what's different, what other people have done.
So I was going to talk to a patent attorney, and basically they'll say if there's any way you can spin it that it's unique, then it's patentable. Now, you know, there's a line, especially in the technology space, between, you know, patenting for valid reasons and being in patent control. You know, just patenting something because, you know, somebody else is doing it, or you know, you want to make it so broad that you can then make money off of suing for your patent. I mean, that's not what we're interested in. But if you can spin it to be unique in any way, shape, or form, it's patentable.
That's a good bit of information. I was going to draw the conclusion that you need to have firepower to go after somebody who friends who patent that you really know you need it as a prerequisite or a salve for investors. They don't care if you have money to go after competition. They just want to know you have it.
My perspective is the patent is something that's more defensive than anything else, right? I mean, it's very difficult to actually go and enforce a patent, and even if you could enforce it, you got to spend a lot of money to do it. So, you know, you're really protecting yourself at that point. And then if you get acquired and the big company has the patent that you came up with, and you know and they have big pockets, right, deep pockets, they can sue someone. So
The other approach, I'm sorry, over the patent point that I'm looking at is you can get a provisional patent fairly easily compared to a full patent. And depending on what it is you're trying to do, if all you need is a year or so to, of a head start before anybody else, and you think that you can get far enough down the road, then maybe the provisional patent is all you ever do. And I know that there are companies that do that. They'll file the provisional, which allows you to put the patent pending on your product, and that theoretically slows down competition enough that maybe you have enough of a head start that you then never go to the full expense of the full patent. So whether you do that, I mean, that's something you need to decide for yourself, but that's something I'm at least considering.
The other thing to keep in mind is that if you file a patent, you actually have to disclose what you're doing. And there are certain businesses where it doesn't make sense. If you have secret sauce and it's behind some walled garden, right, you might not want to share it with anybody.
The details of the patent go public?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to disclose in a patent enough detail that somebody can replicate your system, skilled in the art of, whatever your system is.
Yeah.
So, there's... Yeah.
Okay, Kevin?
I
Did you
guess
introduce yourself?
I did. I'm Kevin. I'm helping Chris to build out the lab here and build our incubator program to support local startups, or I should say Philadelphia area startups, really. I guess could you talk more about the pivot, like the moment that you decided? Because I think this is such a huge thing with startups, and I tell a lot of the startups that we are working with that you have to be ready. Like, I look at it almost as like I went to art school and had to take this sculpting. Yeah, I had to take this sculpting class.
Learn something new.
Learn something new every day, so you would never guess, right? Maybe that's, yeah. So anyway, not to talk too much about that, but I took the sculpting class and it was real. You had to take. I was going for digital stuff, but they made you take like the foundations first, painting, sculpting, everything, and that was actually really awesome because it really, you don't realize how much of that stuff works its way into everything else in your life. So I kind of look at like the startup process as sculpting, like as doing a sculpture, right, and sculpting away the clay.
Right.
And I think that understanding that you're not, that it's not set in stone, right, that you can pivot, that you can change the sculpture as you're sculpting it, or the painting, is so huge. So I guess, could you describe like was there a moment when you knew that your previous idea wasn't going to work, and did you already have the idea for the new thing, or was that after? I guess did you kind of, were you thinking this isn't going to work, and then the new idea then kind of came up, down the line, or
Sure,
talk
that's a
more
good
about
question.
that?
The question is, the moment in which we decided to pivot, what was going on around that time, right? And I got to say, it was really incredibly stressful. I quit my corporate job. I have a product that I can get anybody to even pay me $10 a month for, right? To be honest, I couldn't get anybody to put their app for free either. So, that's not a good place to be either. And, just I don't know if the word is pressure in the accelerator program, but I was going to lose an opportunity on demo day to be in front of investors. And, within, I'd say 2 or 3 days, I decided to pivot. And, when I went back to, you kind of joke with the slide with the little light bulbs, but, unfortunately it's true. I do always have like 97 things in my head at once, all things I'd love to do. This one I did in UXFlip. I really started thinking about, what was hard about mobile, and it just hit me like brick. I mean, I'm like, why can't I change my app? I mean, as a developer, I knew technically I could do it, but Apple's telling me I can't. So, and I needed to find a way to work within the rules that Apple had set. But it was a very stressful time. I mean, with the partners at DreamIt, they asked the right questions. Are you sure that you want to stop? I mean, a lot of investment went into, the company as well from them, talking us through, different ideas, connecting us with people. And, in the end, with where I was in my life and what my personal goals were, it's important if you ever go into an accelerator program to know what your goals are. My goals were to come out with, an idea that I could turn into a business. And so, it was very stressful, but, in the end, I just couldn't see myself working on something that I didn't think that I could make real. That seemed to me like a a worse
And so that-
option
so that
than
forced you-
starting from scratch.
So that kind of, yeah, having that mentality kind of made you say, I need to pivot
Right.
this. You know.
And part of it, I think, is my personality as well. I mean, while this was my first jump into my own startup, and other companies that I've worked for, I've always been like the lead on the project, and it's kind of a similar thing. You start from scratch, right? Okay, well, business says we're going to build this, go build it, right? So, I've always kind of had the mindset, and I love we don't know what we're going to do, we're going to figure it out. So from, my personality as well, I think I had a plan on that. I wasn't afraid to jump into, something new. But it was extremely stressful, knowing that when DreamIt ended, I wasn't going to be very far along in the business, and I was going to have to continue to bootstrap. And the opportunity to raise money or whatever came after was much further out in the future. So,
Brandon and Amelia.
Yeah, along those same lines, I'm interested to hear, you mentioned a lot about, people wouldn't buy this, right? I think that being technical in nature, a lot of people can build just about anything they want, right? Just be like, oh, it's out there, I'm gonna start this new thing, right? I think that's an important point that you found out quickly, well, sort of quickly, that nobody's gonna buy this. When you decided to change, you decided to pivot and start hearing these other things, actually talk to people, and they expressed pain over the approval process. Were you convinced that people would pay for it at that point?
right. So it's a good question. So when I pivoted to the new idea, what made me think that people would pay for such a thing? So there was some interesting things that happened during DreamIt. You get a lot of feedback. One of the things with anybody that you get feedback from, you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? You have to filter. You can't just take feedback at face value. But some of the feedback I got was, was FeedbackTrail big enough, right? And when I came up with the technology for UXFlip, and that and its opportunity seemed way bigger than what FeedbackTrail was. And so I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but I felt like and you try not to start with the technology. You try to start with a lot of times you try to start with a problem you're trying to solve. But the technology, the innovation that I came up with, was going to solve people's problems that were coming up. And I think that's what was a little bit different. I didn't know 100% that people had A/B testing problems and some of the other problems that my technology was going to solve at that point in time. But I knew, based upon the web and other things that came before it, that they absolutely were going to have these problems in the future, and that I was way ahead of the curve. And so I was taking a gamble. And part of what was interesting about my technology was that, and I hope I get to do this again, was the demoing of it appeared so magical to people that they wanted to follow you. They wanted to follow us. They wanted to know how we were doing. They wanted to
I can
be a part
attest
of
to
it.
that. I actually saw one of the first demos. Not you didn't give it, but of appRenaissance was on.
Right. Yeah, and so, like I said, I hope I can reproduce that in another startup, but having that magical effect of, people going, how did you do that? We were at a meetup in New York a couple weeks ago, and one of the sales guys was giving a demo, and he had 3 iOS developers come up to him after the presentation. He did a demo of Artisan after the presentation saying, we're hardcore iOS engineers. We have no clue how you did that, okay? So, to have that kind of appeal in your product, right? It's amazing. I mean, it starts to create its own buzz. And, coming up with that so early, I had to run with it. I mean, it was like one of those, I found a piece of gold, and, I was trying not to tell anyone where it was, but at the same time, kind of showing a shiny piece of gold or something. So, it was still a risk. I mean, there was no guarantee. And not until, I think, that forum event where I actually put it in front of executives, and it was all, high-level executives that were at this conference. And for them to get it, and for them to see the value, and for them to go, yeah, I can see using this in the future, it started to put some validation on it. But, I was, the next step after that, if I hadn't sold to appRenaissance or Artisan Mobile, was, to start building that customer base, to start getting those customers.
Elaine, you want to intro?
Oh, sure. My name is Ilya. I'm over here here. My company does cloud infrastructure services and tech support that have developed pretty much focused on the cloud, particularly Microsoft. My question, so I had another idea that I'm sort of toying with, pursuing a similar fashion you did. Was angel investing the only way that you saw this happening in terms of getting the business off the ground, or did you consider other things that did not work out?
Or did I consider other things? So I was just focused on building the MVP, and I was getting ready to start looking for angel investing. So now I think there's a challenge, right? I mean, and it really depends, I think, on your product and service, right? If you have a product and service that you can sell early to an early customer with, right? That's a great way to start getting revenue, right? Another option is, angel investing. I think for us, I was starting to go down the route of angel investing, primarily because, well, a couple of reasons. One is having some seed money would allow me just to continue to focus on the business, right? Second thing is, I think is along with investors comes their network as well, right? So, there's a bunch of founders in this area that have started like their second or third company, and you'll notice that very early on they'll take investment, right? They're not taking an investment because they don't have their own money to invest in the company, right? Part of the reason is because they're taking investment to get their network of their investors as well, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that when you're taking angel investment or any investment, it should never be a pure taking somebody else's money, right? You can't in 3 weeks go, I'm going to pivot, or I'm going to stop doing this now, right? We had a personal commitment, right, to see that through, and so there's other obligations that come along with taking someone else's money.
Why don't we take 2 more questions, and then people can hang and talk. Mark?
Mike, would you mind walking through the process of DreamIt add a little bit more color to it? So you said it was 12 weeks long. Did you have to go in? Where are they based? Do you have to go in physically every day?
Yeah. So I'll give you more insight into the DreamIt. So more from after the program started.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an application process. You said you walked in and the interview then started. So what is it like once you're in there?
So the application process, like I kind of joked about the 5 weeks before it was painful. And it turns out that the class I was in, they had 500 applications and 14 companies got it. So we were very fortunate. We were very excited. It was great. What you do is you get assigned a mentor, and I would imagine other accelerator programs or something similar. You get assigned a mentor. There's no guarantee. I mean, there's no guarantees at all, right? I know that some startups, they didn't get along with their mentor. It just wasn't a good fit. So you're putting people together. You're putting personalities. You have a small time crunch that you're doing this, right? So for me, I was fortunate that the mentor that I was working with, Bob, we synced and we got along really well very quickly. So you get a mentor. There's partners that are part of the program, and they give you advice along the way. So I think we had a partner meeting. I don't remember if it was every week or every other week, but it's basically a status meeting. Of what you're doing, what do you need, what's going on. Do you have a demo? Can we see it? Who do you need to be introduced to? So there was this constant, from the partner perspective, there's like I mentioned this protective bubble. There's this bubble of people trying to help your business, which is really exciting. It was in Philadelphia, so it was in one of the Science Center buildings, 34th and Market. So I took the train in every day to go there. And for the most part, I think maybe it was like 12 of the companies were all together. I think there was 1 or 2 that worked outside of that space, but we're all in one space. It was kind of like this, a big room, and we all had tables. I mean, it was like working in my basement, my unfinished basement. It was kind of how it felt. But that's startup, right? I mean, they want it to feel like a startup. You don't want to have too nice of a place, and you get too comfortable. And one of the big, there was a lot of value in sitting with other startups so close next to you, talking about things that might be interesting to you. There were many times where I turn around and go, oh, well, I had to deal with that last week. This is what I found out. So there was a lot of communications amongst the teams. The program itself would put on sessions where we'd have evening speakers, and they'd be previous entrepreneurs, or it'd be, I think we had a sales panel at some point. But what was really great about at the end of each one of those was every single person who did a presentation ended with, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. So I'll end my presentation with that as well, because she did that as well. If there's anything I can do to help you, please reach out to me, because I'd love to be able to give back. But, it was very much a community of, just focused on what can we do to help you move your business forward.
But they obviously bet on you yourself rather than the business that you brought in. I mean, because obviously if you pivoted 3/4 of the way through, if you weren't technical in nature, they probably would have freaked out.
Right. So
you can't
I
do
think the
this.
question you're asking, so when you go through the approval process, right? It's, it was pretty stressful. I mean, there was a room, I think there were 4 or 5 of them, and they're all sitting with their laptops in front of me, and my wife and I are sitting down at the table, and they're like firing questions and all this, right? And, one of the big things they wanted to know was, can you build something, right? Like, there's no point in going through a program like this if at the end, you still just have an idea. And so, every company that comes through an accelerator program, I would guess, and I know it's important to dream it, you got to build something. You actually have to have your MVP, because that's how you get to the next step. And so, there were, and some teams had multiple developers. My team just had me, right, my company. So it was very important that the team had somebody that could build, right, the product, somebody with some business experience. So I had a contractor that I brought on board who went to, she had a law degree, and she had a degree from, I'm trying to remember, Columbia University, business degree, and she had worked, I think, in one other startup. So, I brought her on board as to help me out on the business side of things. And I wound up bringing another contractor to help out on the business side. So they were very focused on making sure you had enough of a well-rounded team that you had a chance of being successful, right? And that was kind of, I think, a prerequisite to the program, right? Is having enough of the right skills so you could build a business, you could build a company. But that being said, some companies were 2 people, some companies were 4. I think there was one company that was like 6. We're all different sizes. So.
Well, thanks a lot, Michael. That was enlightening. I'll end it by kind of giving you a heads up. I don't know if I talked about the incubator that we're launching here. It was an idea to do later on in the year, but Chris Lamar here walked in one day and said, hey, I've got this idea. We started talking about it. After a couple of weeks, we were like, wait a minute, we just pared this down to a really good idea, and there's some white label stuff that we could throw together and prove the concept, and we proved it. And it validated this new incubator idea that we have, that we can go up into the to idea people who don't have technical skills or who can build it, but have insight into a vertical, like a pain point. And it's often solving a pain point that leads to success if you do it well enough. So we're kind of doing that model, and we're having fun with Chris. It's not codified yet, it's not 3 months, and it doesn't have a curriculum. It might turn out to be something more flexible, but that idea of leveraging insight from people who have experience in the vertical, I think that's compelling to Kevin and I. So hopefully we get the time out. But thanks for sharing all that, and we should have most or all of it on video. It'll take us a couple of days to get it out. And so if you want to hang out, feel free. And next week is Andrew Schwab, and then I'm harassing Mark and Brandon to also do a presentation in February. So check out the website and find out.
Well, thank you.
We got these awesome shirts. It's our.
So if you're an extra small.
If you buy one, it goes to paper towels for the lab. Startup, man. What's that?
I'll go to Costco and get some for you. How about that?
Hi.
Awesome job.
Oh. Annie? Anna. Thanks for coming out. Good thing I saw your picture on the LinkedIn. What did you think? Cool.
I drove around.
Yeah, you know, it's get a lot of.
Where'd
you find that parking garage?
When I was driving, I thought maybe I should have asked.
Actually, that lot is great. It's accessible off the gate. But Jeannie, this is Anna.
Hi.
She's with SCORE.
Oh, great.
A couple years ago.
Uh-huh.